Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from the Norwegian Chess League. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Jon Ludwig Hammer. We already checked out the first game Magnus played, and this is now his second one, and the third one will be against David Howell, which should be his last game as a reigning World Classical Champion. Now, Magnus and Jon Ludwig Hammer know each other very well. I think they're even good friends, and he's been Magnus's second in his World Chess Championship match against Vishwanathan Anand in 2013. So they know each other very well on and off the board, and it's not easy to prepare for such a game, especially in classical chess. So let's see what Magnus brings to the board. He plays knight to f3, the reti opening. We have pawn to d5, e3, knight to f6, and now c4, challenging the d5 pawn. e6, knight to c3, we have pawn to c5, and now pawn to d4, transposing into the semi-Tarrasch. D captures on c4. It's not an extremely rare continuation, but usually people will just play knight to c6 here. Here, Hammer goes for d captures on c4. Bishop captures, we have pawn to a6, and now pawn to a4 by Magnus, inviting c captures on d4. And there are a few games that reach this position where b5 was played, but here we do have c captures on d4, and it is not as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. Magnus recaptures with bishop to d6, and now queen to e2. We have queen to c7, preventing Magnus from castling, and the bishop to g5 now. And now bishop to d7. It's very interesting. You could capture on h2. It is possible to capture. I mean, you will lose the game, but it's very interesting why it's impossible to capture. I will just show it. The problem is knight to f3, and the bishop has nowhere to go. If you go back to d6, then just e5 loses you the piece. But it's interesting what happens if bishop to e5. Knight captures, queen captures, f4. Queen goes back, we have pawn to e5, challenges the knight, and now once the knight moves, you just capture. Bishop captures, e captures, knight captures, attacks the queen, queen to a5 check, now connects with the knight on d5, and now the sensational pawn to b4. Look at this. You have to capture the queen, and now rook d1, and black resigns. You either move the queen, you either move the queen and then rook to d8 is checkmate, or you capture and then. Okay, black is down a queen. Black has a rook and knight for a queen, but it's not much of a compensation. So that's why you do not capture on h2, in case you were wondering. With bishop to d7, knight to f3, now comes knight to c6, and bishop to b3. We have knight to g4 now, putting a lot of pressure on Magnus's king side. Just rook to d1 by Magnus. We have knight g to e5, now offering some trades here, and the bishop to h4, getting ready to shift the bishop over to this diagonal. We have knight captures, queen captures, and now knight to a5. Hammer looking to trade as many pieces as possible here. Bishop to g3, bishop captures, h captures, and now knight captures on b3. We have a captures on b3, now doubling up both Magnus's b pawn and the g pawn. And here, Hammer castles. And now you're probably thinking, okay, how is Magnus gonna exploit this? Will he do some sort of a weird rook doubling? Will he play king f1, king g1, maybe sacrifice the e5 pawn, maybe shift the rook over to help out with the attack, maybe clear the e4 square for the knight, then maybe knight comes into the attack? None of that. Magnus just plays queen to f4, and he offers a queen trade. And okay, queen captures on f4, g captures on f4, and now bishop to c6, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. We have pawn to f3 and pawn to f5 now. We have pawn to e5, and now rook a to d8, offering a rook trade, king to e2, and here Hammer trades. We have rook captures, and now just king to f7. The king now wants to come to e7, and then the rook can claim the open d file, or maybe the open c file. All depends on what Magnus plays. King e3, we have king to e7, knight to e2 now, also freeing up the c file for the rook if rook to d8 is played, so Magnus doesn't trade everything right away. Bishop to d5 goes after the pawn, and now just knight to d4. And usually when you will have a bishop against a knight on a full board with pawns on both sides of the board, a bishop should be a little bit stronger than a knight. But here both kings are nicely centralized, the rooks are still in the game, so bishop is not that much better than a knight in this situation. Plus, the knight is positioned brilliantly. It's on a dark square, so the bishop cannot attack it, and it's very unlikely that the rook will capture it at any point. So here we have g6, rook to h1, forcing Hammer to figure out what to do with the h7 pawn, rook to f7, and now pawn to b4, getting rid of the weakness on b3, and also maybe with some ideas of pawn to b5. We have king to d8, shifting the king over to the queen side, and now pawn to b5. We have king to c7, and rook to c1 with check. King to b6, and now b captures on a6. Also, you could consider something like rook to c8, but Magnus has a different idea. Captures, rook 8 to c8 now, and pawn to a5. We have king to d3, and now rook to g7. Rook to g7, just wasting a move here. Rook to d8, now Magnus wants to play rook to d6 with check, and then gobble up the e6 pawn with the knight. And here Hammer should just play rook to e7. He should keep this pawn defended. It's nicely defended. Everything else is nicely defended. The king defends the a5 pawn. This will be possible to hold. However, after this rook to d8 move, he played king to c5, and while it's a nice move, it does allow Magnus one particular move that wins the game. So feel free to pause the video and win this game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a true master of the endgame. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to b8, cutting off the king from the b file, and also threatening rook to b5 checkmate. And the only way to stop this is to block the rook via the b7 square. You could play bishop to b7, but then you also blunder the e6 pawn. So here rook to b7 is forced, and now Magnus just plays knight captures on e6 with check. Of course, if you capture, then you lose the rook. So king to b4, and now he trades rooks. So rook captures, bishop captures, and king to d4. And now if you counter the material, Magnus is up a pawn, and he does have the passed e pawn. And now it's only a matter of moving the knight and advancing this pawn to victory. So bishop to c6, Hammer has some ideas. He might be able to stop the pawn. Even if he has to give up the bishop for the pawn, he could still maybe capture the b pawn and then maybe start advancing his a pawn to victory, or maybe to a draw. Knight to c5 by Magnus with pawn to h5, and now pawn to b3, not even allowing pawn to a4. We have pawn to h4, and now pawn to e6 by Magnus. We have bishop to a8. Now, the idea is, like I said, if pawn to e7, then bishop c6 guards the e8 square. And now if you persist, for example, knight b7, of course you're not going to capture, you need to keep an eye on that square. Then king b5, and now if knight to d6 with check, you're gonna play king to b4. And now it seems like, okay, but you can just, win the bishop. It's not gonna be that great. King will capture on b3, and now how are you stopping this pawn? Sure, you can bring the knight into the game. Let's say knight to c4, but now king comes to c2. Now the king starts going to the king side to gobble up these pawns. So it would be very hard to restrain all of these pawns. So that's why after bishop to a8, Magnus just goes for knight to d3 check, king captures on b3, and knight to e5, and he was now in this position on move 44 that Jon Ludvig Hammer resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So Magnus wins his second game in a row in the Norwegian Chess League, and there is only one that remains. It is tomorrow's game against David Howell, and that will be his last game as a reigning world classical champion, his last classical game. So here the knight is guarding the c6 square, and there's no way for the bishop to stop promotion. e7, e8 is coming next, and that doesn't really matter what you play. If you start advancing the pawn, just pawn to e7, and that's pretty much it. This the pawn is too slow. You're just not in time to do anything. If pawn to a3, you bring a queen into the game. That's it. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Magnus. It was a fairly equal position, but this king to c5 move just allowed Magnus this winning idea. But even if you don't play king to c5, it's not easy to find moves here. Like other than rook to e7, which is a very passive idea. Maybe Hammer just wanted to also keep winning chances alive, and then he played an active move. But yeah, like I said, that's what happened. Hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Chris Foster, Bernard Domrani, Funky Monk, Ravishing Reptiles YouTube, and Sekanka Travel and Tour Safaris for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.